Welcome. I'm Micheline Bradley from Metis Consulting Services, and today we are going to talk about REMS. I love REMS. I have been working in the REM space since it became a formal thing, and before that, I was working in the informal space of it. And REMS in the US is risk evaluation and mitigation strategy. It was formalized in 2007 and grew out of that previous system for monitoring a small number of high-risk drugs. And the determination for a product to require a REMS comes through the approval process in the US only. And there are certain therapeutic areas where we know that there will be a REMS from early stages of development, including opioids, psychedelics, and cannabinoids. And each REMS has a individual structure based on the profile of each product, which makes the design and implementation. I have in my notes that it makes the implementation a little murky, but it's not really murky. It's that there are nuances for each one. And some may only require a communication plan, which is informational, letting the most impacted, basically the three Ps, physicians, pharmacists, and patients, knowing about providing information to them regarding potential issues around the REMS product. Others may require a medication guide to ensure compliance, and still others may require what's called an ITASU, or element to assure safe use, which is a more involved process requiring clinicians or healthcare institutes to become certified prior to prescribing. And REMS requires more scrutiny on the drug from the manufacturer to the patient, and steps along the way, which have historically been very labor intensive and meant a great deal of heavy lifting by the patients, prescribers, and pharmacists. So those three Ps. So what does this mean for the sponsor of a REMS product? First of all, this means, and this is a shameless plug, this means that you should absolutely join forces with an organization that has come into existence in the last few years called the REMS Industry Consortium, or RIC. You should absolutely get involved with them because that is where the experts in the area are basically creating a space for sponsors and service providers to connect and discuss what issues come up so that we can avoid the siloing of information from one group to the next. Additionally, make sure to ask all of the questions. There's a saying for those there's a one of those quirky catchphrases that we use, that if you've seen one REMS, you've seen one REMS, because they historically have been very different. And so something that requires a communication guide is going to be very different than something than a REMS, which requires a great deal more involvement, um, such as the certification prior to prescribing. We have seen historically that there has been a great deal of heavy lifting by the patients, prescribers, and pharmacists within organizations. And excuse me. And one of the things that I would like to see as a REM service provider is to ease that burden a bit and push some of that responsibility up the hill, which would ease the way for patients, prescribers, and pharmacists. We have an upcoming, there's upcoming legislation. Well, there's a meeting on the 7th of November with the FDA to discuss the upcoming REM logic model. And there is a proposed framework to link program design with assessment. And that piece is available in draft form now. And I highly recommend going in and looking at that and submitting comments during this comment timeframe. And where these connect with the EMA, because of course we have the REMS in the US, and in Europe they require a different program, which is a bit more universal and has slightly different qualifications and requirements. But in the EU, they require an RMP for all products, at which point the assessment is done um, for a safety specification, pharmacovigilance plan, and risk mitigation plan. And that's really what we're looking at, is how do we assure that risks are minimized and the overall safety profile of the products are meeting the benefit risk map that we need to see for medication. So if the risk outweighs the benefits, then that's not really what we're looking for. Any questions now?
Yeah, how many REMS products are actually on the market or actively being developed right at the moment?
So currently there are 74, and there's a variety. Again, there are single REMS, there are shared REMS where there are multiple products with a single profile. And so you can see where there are pieces that line up. For example, the first REMS that I worked on was the turf REMS, which was part of the opioid REMS. And so there were several of us who were on that were sponsors as well as the service providers. So there's variation there as well because of the way that the REMS are formatted. So you may have a single REMS if you are the only sponsor to have an approved indication in this manner, or you also may have a shared REMS where there are multiple companies with a similar product.
I wonder, I have a question. I wonder if you could let us know any issues that you've seen when you come in to somebody who's already started with a REMS, but they hadn't fully understood what they needed to do.
Absolutely. So Metis is a service provider, and I did previously work for sponsor organization. And so some of the things that we see going in, as a service provider, if our clients had previously worked either individually or with other organizations, or if they're taking over pieces, is, you know, we'll see a gross underestimation of how much information is needed and how many, just for basics, like how many people would be calling into call centers. There was one product that we worked with that the estimate was that there would be roughly 2,000 calls per week. And in the first week, when the system moved to a new vendor, we saw roughly 20,000 in a week. And how do you identify that balance? Where does that go? Organizations who go in and don't understand that they need to have each piece approved by the agency. So they can't just go in and make changes to their website. It needs to be submitted for review and approved by the FDA. And not having a clear understanding of that is a giant piece.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So this is just a high-level basic overview. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to let me know. And we will talk more about REMS. And does anyone have anything else at this time? Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me today. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everybody.